Hey, what's up? This is Sully from Godsmack. Strap on those boots, baby, because you are now in the trenches of the war room with the one and only Mistress Carrie right here on the Mistress Carrie podcast.
What's up? This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Her hair so lovely, pretty eyes.
Hey, this is Brent from Shinedown, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie. Hey, Carrie, go put your bra on, girl.
Hey, this is Steven Tyler, and you be listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
What's up? This is Aaron from Stain, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Hi, everybody. This is Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and you're listening to the one, the only Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is David from the band Disturbed, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
Hi, Bruce Dickinson here from Iron Maiden. Yes, indeed, Miss Whiplash herself, Mistress Carrie, is here to unchain your brain.
Hi, this is Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You're listening to Mistress Carrie.
This is Dennis Leary. You are listening to my favorite, Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is Corey from Stone Sour, and you have the privilege of listening to Mistress Carrie. Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
Hey, it's Mistress Carrie, reporting for duty from MCHQ for episode 285 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. And before we get to this week's guest, Corey Beaulieu from Trivium, I want to let you know about new items that are available in the online Mistress Carrie store. Just in time for your holiday shopping, there's a reflective beanie that'll keep you warm and safe when you're jogging or walking the dogs while it's dark outside. It's a great gift for bikers, too. And new in the store this week, the official Mistress Carrie magnetic jack rack. Just like the jack rack so many of your favorite bands have made, this rack mounts on your wall with 4 matching guitar plug keychains. It's a great way to keep all of your personal and work keys organized, and it makes a great gift. Just log on to MistressCarrie.com and click shop. Corey Beaulieu from Trivium is my guest this week. Earlier this year, we talked about celebrating the 20th anniversary of their album Ascendancy and the new EP Struck Dead that's available everywhere. We also talked about the construction of their new facility, Hangar Studio, and the extensive Trivium band archives that now have a permanent home. I've played a bunch of this audio on my various radio shows, but I finally got around to releasing the full interview. So allow me to introduce you to Corey Beaulieu from Trivium. What's up, Corey? Thanks for coming on the show.
No, thanks for having me.
I think we met a long time ago when AAF was still on the air, but it's been a while.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, we probably crossed paths at some point over the years.
At some point. I really appreciate you coming on the show. You guys got a lot going on. A new EP on the way, some tour dates in New England.
Yeah. It's going to be a busy, last couple of months of the year. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We're, been looking forward to getting new music out after 4 years of nothing. So it's been fun to have a upcoming release and then celebrate with a fun tour to cap off the year.
I talked to a lot of bands and there's a lot of different opinions, and obviously none of them are the right opinion about releasing full-length albums versus EPs versus singles just for the digital age that we live in now. Obviously, you guys decided let's just release an EP.
Yeah, it was kind of a pivot. It wasn't the original plan for an EP. We had taken all of 2024 off of touring and everything, and we had this year planned for the 20th anniversary Ascendancy touring. That the original idea was it was supposed to be pretty much like the whole year. So that was obviously the plan. So new music was definitely not or a new album, I should say, it was not on the schedule until, next year. But since we were going to be touring and being busy with, the anniversary stuff, we still were like, hey, it'd be a good opportunity to use all the, promotion and attention from, kind of celebrating an anniversary thing, that it'd be cool to, drop in some new music while we were doing that. And, obviously you just said people doing just standalone singles and stuff like that and the, streaming stuff. That was kind of like the initial idea was like, hey, we'll just, we were building a studio. So we obviously wanted to have, once it was done, we wanted to, have something to record to, break it in and test it out. So we were just like, hey, we'll write a new song. And so we started working on, the first song, which was Bear Me With Your Screams. So we, started working on the song, and then it just kind of, once we got kind of the creative juices flowing again, it was one song turned into two, and then two turned into three. And so we're just like, let's just record all three of them. So we did. And then we just had these three songs in our back pocket. And, the original idea was just kind of like, we'll drop a new song or two kind of like throughout the year as we were touring for the anniversary. And then once that plan kind of, pivoted and changed, we were, kind of like, what do we, what do we do with these songs? And then, it just kind of, the idea for just releasing all three of them as an EP came up, and we thought it was kind of a cool idea, something different that we haven't done before, and a way to kind of just get all three songs out for the fans at one time, and then kind of clear the deck for, creatively for kind of having a clean slate for the next record, and just kind of start from scratch with kind of building our creative vision for the next record with kind of nothing on the table. So the EP, we were just like, we'll just get those songs out as its own thing, since it was kind of just done as a random kind of project. There wasn't really like a big game plan as far as like what do we like, especially like when we dive into like making a record, there's a lot more kind of a planned kind of what we're trying to create in a an album environment. So this was just kind of like a fun, kind of thing that it's been cool to just kind of let it be kind of like it's this very free kind of a project that it's been fun to just kind of let it be like kind of what it is without kind of thinking too hard on it.
You talk about celebrating an anniversary. A lot of bands are commemorating different anniversaries in their careers. Does it still sound weird to say 20th anniversary of something? I would imagine it's kind of insane to think that it's been 20 years, like that the band has been around long enough to be able to commemorate an anniversary that big.
Yeah, it's kind of weird in a sense that it doesn't feel like it's been 20 years like that. I think especially the Ascendancy, that record, it still feels like a relevant album to this day. So it doesn't feel like 20 years like, oh, it's like dated or anything. So still feels kind of fresh. So it's like we've always been playing songs from the record, so it like never like disappeared or went away or anything like that. So it still feels very fresh to us. So it's definitely crazy, it's 20 years because, we've always been asked, because over the last, maybe like 10 years or so, if maybe that's trying to remember when it seemed like it was like maybe like around 10 years ago that like a lot of bands started doing like 10-year anniversary tours or 15-year anniversary tours, and became like kind of like this new kind of popular kind of tour idea for people to do. And we would always get asked by fans or people, you got an anniversary for this record coming up. Would you ever do like a tour or something like that? And we were kind of always, we were always kind of focused on always moving forward with new music and kind of the next thing onward, with what we were doing. But we'd always kind of say back then, we're like, hey, if it got to 20 years and people still gave a shit, we would do it. So Ascendancy was just kind of always like the record that we're like, yeah, it was like our first big breakthrough, and it did make an impact when it came out with a lot of people and stuff like that. That we're like, yeah, it's like if it got to that point, that record was definitely the one that we would do it for. And the tours we did for it were amazing. The reaction and the turnouts were incredible. So we had a lot of fun with it, and it was really cool. And then definitely we were it's nice to be able to have celebrated it, and then we're just kind of now we're just back on track with kind of focusing on Trivium in 2026 for new music.
You mentioned building Hangar Studios. It's in Orlando, which is like the home base for the band. You're a Maine guy. Obviously, I'm in New England as well. Are you in Florida all the time? And have you acclimated to the temperatures yet?
No. Well, I'm in Florida full time. Been living here since moved down here in 2002. So I've been here ever since. Haven't been to Maine in a while, but I used to go there at least once a year for like the holidays when my parents were still living in Maine. Still have a lot of family up there, but my parents actually, once they retired, they moved down to Florida, so they're not they're about like a little over an hour from where I live now. My sister moved down to Florida. She's in northern Florida, so she's still kind of a ways away from me. But they all came down to Florida for different stuff, and then but still got a lot of family and friends and stuff up in Maine. So when we play up there in I don't know, it was like a month maybe or a couple weeks from now.
November 8th at the Cross Insurance Arena in Portland.
Yeah, so there'll be a lot of people I know coming out to that. A lot of family. I've already getting the texts and messages about tickets and blah 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 and all that stuff. So it'll be fun. I haven't been up there in a while, and definitely the being from Maine, even living in now I've lived in Florida longer than I lived in Maine, but I still. I guess the Maine blood, I can definitely handle cold weather more than the heat. So I definitely, when it's the death summers, when it gets like incredibly hot and humid down here, I'm a hermit hanging inside with the AC and not going outside too much.
Yeah, there's just something about you get over like 78 or 80 degrees, and anyone that grew up in the cold weather is like, okay, I'll see you guys when it's cooler outside. I can't handle this crap. It's terrible.
Yeah, that's why, especially it's even harder sometimes when we like tour over in Europe in the summer, and they don't do AC like America does. So even when you're in a hotel or somewhere, it's still like you're like, oh my God, I wish it was colder. And some places don't even have AC at all, so it can get pretty brutal. But that's why I always. We would always talk up to our manager and stuff like that. I'm just like, yeah, it's like my favorite time of the year to tour Europe is like November through like February when it's cold. And then, so I'm looking forward to this tour this year since we're playing a lot of, we're playing in Canada in like December. So I'm like, it's going to be colder. And my other guys in the band, they're total Florida guys. So they're just always about the warmth and stuff and the cold, and then they're all bundled up and stuff in the winter, and then I'll just be like walking outside in like a t-shirt
in shorts.
Yeah, and like just like, oh, it's not cold at all. And they're like, dude, it's like 40. I'm like, nah, it's nothing. We walk to school in shorts and the shit in the back of the day. So it's I can I've done all that stuff. Being in like Finland and like December and it's like 5 degrees outside and I'm just like walking around in like a t-shirt and just like, it's no big deal.
I made the mistake of going to Rome in early August and it was like 95 degrees every day. Thankfully, where we stayed, it had an air conditioner because otherwise I think I would have just melted away to nothing. It was brutal.
Yeah, it gets a lot of places over in Europe is basically you're be ready to sweat because that's basically all you're going to be doing all day. Even when you're like, that's the hardest time, like, especially when you're over there in like the summertime, even if you're like staying in a hotel and it might have AC, sometimes it's like false hope where you see the AC thing on the wall, but you're like, you don't feel it at all. And you're just laying in bed, just, sweating through the sheets, trying to actually get some sleep. So it's, get pretty intense over there, but I guess same thing with being from Maine in the cold. I guess everyone over there, they're just kind of used to that, and it doesn't bother them, so it's good for them.
The Ascend Above the Ashes tour kicks off on Halloween, which anybody that's ever listened to my show knows is my favorite day of the year. Did you grow up a lover of Halloween as well?
When I was a kid, I definitely dressed up and did that whole thing. Definitely as an adult, I definitely haven't partaken in any of that. Like a lot of people do. I've gone out actually, down here in Orlando. I've actually gone out with friends on Halloween, and it's probably one of the worst times of the year to actually go out to bars or anywhere to hang out, because it's just everyone comes out of the woodworks and it's very unenjoyable. So I've avoided that, but I can't remember. Like, I think I had somebody asked me about it yesterday in an interview about Halloween, and I couldn't remember because they asked me if, like, since the first show of the tour is on Halloween, if we were going to dress up or do anything. And I was like, man, I can't even remember if we ever actually played a show on Halloween. And because I was like, I don't think we've ever really dressed up. The only time we've dressed up in costumes is when we were doing, like, years ago over in the UK, we did some secret shows where we pretended to be our own tribute band. So we dressed up in, like, random costumes and just came out and, like, pretended to be like this ridiculous, like, Trivium cover band. So that was the only time I ever dressed up on stage. And I don't think we might have, the only time I can remember is maybe like in 2000, I think it was like 2009. We did a European tour with Slayer. And I remember we might have actually played a show on Halloween on that tour, because I remember Brent from Mastodon dressed up like Jeff Hanneman from Slayer on stage. And I remember him walking around in his full, he had all, like, the shin pads and the leather pants and stuff. But he did, like, the full Jeff Hanneman tribute dress up. So I'm like, that had to have been Halloween, because that would have been just really weird to just do that randomly. So, but I don't think we did, but a couple other people had done it at some point that we've witnessed some of the Halloween celebrations. And there's usually always a good amount of people in the crowd that come dressed to impress with some interesting costumes.
What about when you were a kid? What is the year of Halloween that you absolutely killed it with a costume?
Oh boy. I think when I was a kid, the only thing I can really remember for dressing up, like going full on, I think when I was really little, I was really into, like, WWF wrestling when I was a little kid. So the funny story, I remember one year it was probably like, had to have been like right around kind of close to the time he actually kind of debuted. But like when the Undertaker first came out, and he was like the super kind of scary original Undertaker when he first debuted. I remember one year I dressed up like the Undertaker and did the full thing. I had, like, the hat with the hair, the full Undertaker outfit. But then I was like, oh yeah, I'm the Undertaker. This is a cool costume. And then I remember when I first showed up, someone asked me, since I had, like, the Undertaker hat, and then it was like I didn't have long hair, but I think, I don't know, my mom, like, took, like, black yarn and, like, glued it to the hat so it looked like I had long hair. But when I showed up, someone asked me if I was Michael Jackson, and I was so bummed that they totally did not get the costume. I was like, oh man, I'm like, I'm the Undertaker, not Michael Jackson. But I guess, like, in the early 90s, like, he was doing the whole black hat with the hair kind of motif thing for, like, the era he was doing. So I guess now I can, like, oh yeah, maybe it's, Michael Jackson was, massive pop star. So, probably more people knew him than the Undertaker at the time. So, but I did that. And then I think one time in high school, I think I dressed as, like, a black metal guitarist or some shit for something. I can't remember what it was, but definitely wasn't like a trick-or-treating Halloween type thing. It was like for some high school Halloween dance maybe or some shit. Cause I remember doing that. It was probably like the last time I, like, actually put some effort into dressing up in some kind of Halloween garb kind of thing.
Well, by the time you were in high school, you were already playing guitar, right? Did you start when you were, like, 14 or something?
Yeah. I was playing. I started, like, I'd have been like middle school-ish or something like that. It was kind of right when basically I started playing guitar when I, got introduced to like metal. So it was kind of hand in hand with, discovering the music. And then it just kind of instantly sparked the guitar player interest in me.
I always ask guitar players about their first guitar because of that, you never forget your first love kind of thing. So where did it come from, and do you still have it?
My very first guitar I ever owned is the only guitar that I've ever sold.
Ah!
And it was like it was kind of a, my first guitar, like the guitar that I got was not the guitar I ordered. So I did luck out that I got a way nicer instrument for my first guitar than I planned, because basically it was kind of like the same, kind of story of like, I wanted to play guitar, and my parents were like, well, if you prove to us that you're serious, like mow lawns and earn some money, if you earn half the cost, we'll pitch in the other half to make sure that you're actually like wanting to do this and not
That's
just
a fair deal.
Yeah. So I did that. And then, at the time, I just found a guitar and a cheap amp in a Musician's Friends magazine, a mail order music, site, or back then it was a magazine, so ordered this guitar, and it was like I think it was like $179, and the amp was like $40 or some shit. And then, just kind of waited for it to show up, and I showed up, and it was like, wow, this box looks different. And I ended up getting a Les Paul guitar that was like 3 times more expensive, but they didn't charge me for it. So someone in the mail order room did me a solid and gave me a way nicer guitar, and it worked out. It was I was pretty excited at the time, because my first band that got me into hard rock and got me interested in guitar was Guns N' Roses. So getting a Les Paul, I was like, oh, it's like Slash. So I was pretty stoked on that. And then eventually down the road, I ended up selling it to buy another guitar, which I still have that. So my first guitar was the only one I sold, which kind of bummed about, but that's probably maybe the played into why I've never sold any gear since. Basically, I hoard everything and I keep everything, and even if I don't play it or it sits in a case at our hangar, I know it's there, for whenever I feel like, playing it or using it or just even looking at it. So, so I keep everything now, and maybe someday I'll try to. I remember what kind of guitar it was and how it looked, so maybe I can find like a replica to be its placeholder.
I talked to the DeLeo brothers from Stone Temple Pilots a while ago, and they talked about that once an instrument gives you a song, that it's like near impossible to get rid of that guitar, or just an instrument in general, a bass, a guitar, or whatever, because it gave you this gift. And so you have this, instead of it just being an object that you love, there's a sentimental attachment for what it's giving you. Is it like that for you too?
Yeah, it's, like all my guitars, like, at least the majority of all my guitars, from, I still have like one of my first guitars that I had that I bought in Maine, at the Mark's Music and Brewer, where I took guitar lessons. I have that guitar sitting like 10 feet from me. But a lot of the guitars, like, I'll be like, I give them nicknames for, because for those early guitars, like, I call this one like the Pull Harder guitar because I used it like it's in the music video, or like the guitar I have that was in the Like to the Flies music video back in the day. Or I call one of my first Flying V guitar, I call it the Gunshot guitar because I used it in the Gunshot music video. So it's like visually like, in like the history of the band, and just a lot of stuff with my guitars where I just remember like, I use that guitar to record the guitar solo for this song or that song, or I wrote this riff or something with it. So it's kind of hard to let go of instruments that you have, history with, or even like a lot of guitars, maybe if I didn't record anything with them, I just was like, oh yeah, I used that guitar. That guitar was like my main guitar for like this whole tour cycle. And, it's all beat up from playing like, 300 shows with it and all that stuff. So, the cool thing now is over the last like, couple months, now that, we've had some time off tour, and we've been, the studio has been finished and there's no, nonstop or a lot of construction stuff going on up there. It's, kind of all settled down that we've been able to get up there and spend the time to kind of, with all the, when we had all the construction and stuff, we had everything packed away, to, there's a lot of construction dust and all this stuff. So we've finally been, getting like to kind of decorating the place with all our memorabilia and all this stuff. So we've been hanging up a bunch of stuff that we've collected over the years.
I was going to ask you about that because I built my own studio, and you build a workspace that is exactly the way you want it, and it's designed for exactly what you need. And then you start going through all of your stuff, and you guys must have some amazing... I'm the person that saves everything too, right? That there's a sentimental attachment to all of this stuff. So going through the Trivium archives and decorating your new studio with... Like, what are some of the things you found in that process that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe we still have this. This is amazing.
Yeah, it was like when the actual studio part, we have like this kind of entryway that we got all these like wall hangers kind of stuff. And just basically just like, it was cool because like the same thing with like the sentimental stuff about guitars, we started hanging up all the guitars in like this walkway because it was kind of like when we're in the studio, if you need to like get an instrument or like there's a certain guitar that you need for a certain sound or whatever, like they're all there. But it was cool like once we brought them all out, and it was like once you see them all up on the wall, you're like, oh yeah, there's a story about this guitar, and you could go just kind of down the wall of like telling a story about each one. And then when we were going through, like the first thing we did, like in our main room is over the years, like especially over in like Europe and South America and stuff like that, they love to make their country flags and decorate them with like your logo and stuff. And we had boxes of just all these like country flags from tours. So we basically just covered like the whole wall of just all these flags from like Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, like all this stuff. They have like, all the fan clubs, they'll like all sign it and they put like the date when you were there. So you kind of, when you walk in, you're like, oh yeah, we played, that's from Colombia in like 2012, and shit like that. So it's cool to have all that stuff on the wall. And then, each person like Paulo and Matt from like the early days, cause like, their parents were also the managers of their band. So like, we were going through all this stuff. We found all these like boxes of VHS tapes from like 1999 and like Trivium's like first like local band shows. We found a flyer Paulo saved that was from 2004. It was when Trivium and Paulo's original band Metal Militia played the one and only Sun and Steel Festival in Tampa, Florida, which was done by the Milwaukee Metal Fest promoter. And we had the original poster or flyer for it and like Trivium's names misspelled and all this shit. And so we had that and like just like old flyers from like back in the day, even stuff that wasn't even like Trivium related, but it was like Paulo still had like from living in like South Florida, like going to like metal shows in like the early 2000s and shit. And I'm like, oh yeah, I saw that tour in Worcester, like back in like 2001. And he saw it down in Florida. So just even stuff like that. And then there's just like posters from like we've collected over the years from different tours from all over the years. There was, fan gifts, even like still have t-shirts from our very first tour we ever did in 2004 that the printer, the people that made the shirts printed them badly and the wrong size. So they're just these comically bad tour shirts. We still have that, still have tour shirts or band shirts from the Trivium local band days and stuff like that. So it's just like, and we still have more, we've been going through it all and trying to get as much hung up and kind of unearthed out of the boxes. But there's still tons of stuff that we have to still go through. So it's luckily we have a big space that there's still plenty of wall room and areas to put it up. So we're slowly, getting through it all, but it's pretty crazy how much we've, stored away over the years. And it's cool to have, cause I guess looking back, it'd be kind of a bummer that, a lot of this stuff that we forgot about, you're like, oh man, it's cool. We still have it. It would have been a bummer if it was, lost somewhere and, don't have it to, reminisce about.
You talk about the Palladium, which is in Worcester, Mass, for anybody that's listening that doesn't know that. But I think a lot of people that did not grow up in the Northeast still know about the Palladium because, and it shocks me when I talk to people that didn't grow up in the Northeast, how well known the Northeast is for its hard rock and like metal community, that I don't think a lot of people would necessarily associate the Northeast with metal, but as someone that's a product of it, as you are, that there's such a stronghold for that type of music here.
Yeah, it was wild. Like growing up, like where I lived, it was basically like anyone that listened to like real metal. It was like me and like two of my friends. Like no one really knew much of anything. And at least in my small town, it was like I felt like it was like what I listened to or what I was into. Well, back then it was a lot of the stuff, especially like maybe like the European metal and like it was a lot more underground stuff than it is now. Like it's definitely grown and way bigger. But back then it was like what I was listening to, like no one really heard much about it unless it was like the super mainstream bands. So, growing up, it was just like, kind of felt like I just kind of was like, oh, just listen to my own stuff. And, but like when I went to like my first actual concert, it was like, oh, wow, there's like,
there's
you actually
more
got to see
of
there.
us.
Oh, there's a lot of people that listen to this stuff too. I'm not just the only one in my small town that listens to this kind of metal. And then, back then it was like, no one really played in Maine. Like it was very, very few and far between. There was actually like a concert somewhere like nearby. I lived like central Maine. So even getting somewhere in Maine for a concert was a couple hour drive, let alone going to like Massachusetts for a show. But we did eventually, once I got a little bit older, my parents weren't, kind of let me loose a little bit. Me and my friends did make a handful of trips down to Worcester. That was like the kind of our introduction back then was like, if you wanted to go to a show, usually like the majority of everything was going to the Palladium was like the spot where everything was hitting. So, we went down there and, we got to, go to like, back then went to like the New England Hardcore Metal Festival was a big thing that we went to.
Which
and then,
came back this year, by the way.
Yeah, that was like the kind of big thing back then because it was like a yearly thing, and we went there one year for that. There was another thing at the Palladium was like a 1-day metal fest I remember going to, and then we went to some other stuff down there. But that was kind of like the spot was like, especially for the Mainers, like mostly everything would come to Worcester or Boston. I never went to Boston for any shows, but it was like that was kind of like where the cutoff was for a lot of tours. Would go to Worcester and then they would change direction. And but there was some stuff that especially my very first concert was actually in Lewiston. Like some bands were still going to the Lewiston Civic Center for concerts for stuff like that. So my first shows were in Lewiston, and then eventually I had to go to Portland and then Worcester. So it kind of kept going further south.
Who was the first show?
It was the Lewiston Civic Center, and I believe it was 98 was Megadeth on the Cryptic Writings tour with Coal Chamber and Life of Agony.
Wow.
So I saw that, and then I'll see same in Lewiston. Not too long after that, I saw it was actually kind of fun. I was going because it was the Slayer on the Diablos and Musica tour with Meshuggah and I think it was Sick of It All or something like that. But I guess like in Maine, there was the Fear Factory Obsolete tour was also, they combined the shows into like kind of like I guess like a mini festival. So it was like a combination of two tours that they had there. And then And then my last show in Lewiston was the Extreme Steel, the last Pantera tour that they played in Lewiston. That I got to see the end or the original Pantera lineup and the last time they played in Maine. So that was pretty sweet.
The metal community at large has obviously in the last couple months been in mourning because of Ozzy's passing. And I think that coming up in the rock and metal world, that it would be impossible to not in some way, shape, or form be influenced and inspired by Ozzy and Sabbath. So can you talk to me about, if there is an influence, what that influence is for you? And also, did you ever get to meet him? Because it seems like everybody's got some kind of crazy Ozzy story.
We never got to meet Ozzy, but being on Ozzfest was a massive thing for us. That was basically Ozzfest and Ozzy was like kind of like when that tour was going on. It was like the tastemaker tour of like, if you were on that tour, it was a big deal, and there was always a band or two that kind of got launched off that touring thing because it had a lot of influence and being on the tour definitely got you in front of a lot of people. So that definitely helped us a tremendous amount. So we're always thankful for being on that tour. And I guess like with any guitar player that's come up, you're influenced by Ozzy or a guitar player from Ozzy's band in some form, if you like it or not. You could try, but there's always something that's gonna like trickle into like influencing you or inspiring you. And that was great. Ozzy always had amazing guitar players, basically amazing musicians in all facets of his lineup. And then even like I think I answered this before because we were in the UK, not far from Birmingham, like not long after everything happened, and we were playing a festival over there, and obviously we were getting questions about Sabbath, Ozzy, and all that kind of stuff. And I was just saying, like, yeah, when I was growing up, when I first got into metal, like my introduction or my era of metal, that was like my kind of like introduction to the whole thing was more of the early 80s, like Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, Iron Maiden kind of era, and like Sabbath and all that stuff. Before that was I got into way kind of more later on. Like obviously I knew Sabbath and knew all the big songs and Deep Purple and Rainbow and all that kind of stuff, but it wasn't really like my go-to stuff at the time when I was younger because I was very into like the fast thrash stuff and everything. But in a sense, it's like even if you didn't really listen to Sabbath or dove into the records and really listen to them, it was like their influence on just music in general and metal, like it was so big that it's like, even if like it's like I listen to Metallica, but it's like Sabbath influenced Metallica. So it's like in any kind of sense, it's like me listening to Metallica, I'm still getting like the DNA of like the Sabbath sound into my playing or into my head in that way. And same thing with like, the Beatles influenced those bands before them. And it's like, I didn't really listen to the Beatles, but I'm sure there's something where I could go back and be like, oh yeah, that kind of reminds me of this blah, blah, blah part in this song. And when I listen to like the Metallica stuff and especially like Kill 'Em All, you can like, or Megadeth and Slayer, it's like, you can hear, when you really know the music well, it's like, you can be like, oh yeah, that I can hear where they got the influence for this part or this kind of vibe of this thing and like that. And definitely as the years went on, I've gone back and dove into more of like, especially like a lot of the 70s stuff that was like kind of like the blueprint for the stuff that I eventually, that was my era. You can kind of go back and like, oh yeah, I can hear where like all my influences got kind of like their influences from. And then obviously it was like kind of like discovering like another kind of genre that kind of can help inspire. Cause I remember when we were doing the Silence in the Snow album, what we were doing on that record, I was listening to a lot of like Rainbow and Richie Blackmore and kind of diving into all that music at the time that I got kind of like a different inspiration for certain things based off of just kind of diving into that era of music and stuff. And it's always good for a musician to have a well-rounded knowledge of kind of like the genre that you're playing. So yeah, definitely after going back, and it's even crazy, like after like when the Back to the Beginning thing was going on for the Ozzy stuff, and watching it and hearing some of the stuff, I was diving into some of those Sabbath records and being like, wow, there's a bunch of stuff on, like, obviously, like the massive songs, but then diving into some of those albums, there's definitely a lot of stuff, like a lot of deep cuts that I'm like, I don't think I've ever heard this song before. And you're like, wow, there's some really interesting experimental stuff that you're kind of like, wow, this is a Sabbath song. You're like, wow, it's like
they really did try a
interesting.
lot of different things that are not the songs they're known for, but they really were risk takers. And I forget who I was talking to recently. It was Johnny Three Tears from Hollywood Undead. And he was like, credit needs to be paid for those executives at the labels back in the day that were like, we're going to sign this and release it because it was so out of the box, different and dangerous. He's like, people don't realize how scary and what a risk that was for companies to release that stuff, because Sabbath was viewed as really dangerous back then.
Yeah, like even just like diving through some of those records, and like there's like some really experimental kind of like, I don't know if it's like hippie or whatever, but it's like very I guess like in the 70s or whatever, but it was like kind of really spacey, kind of like experimental ambient kind of ballady type of stuff where you're just like, oh, it's like I wouldn't expect Sabbath to do this, but they were like, everyone views them as like this, the creators of metal, but like there was a lot more versatility in what they could do than I guess like on the surface of like what you think of like, what Sabbath is. So there's some really cool stuff. And I remember seeing an interview with Tobias from Ghost, and he was talking about the experience of Back to the Beginning. And he was like, yeah, there was a song I really wanted to do, but it was like a really deep cut, like, and you're wanting to play a lot of the big stuff that people know. And he name dropped like this song that he really wanted to play, talking about like his favorite Sabbath song. And I was like, I don't think I've ever heard of that song before. Like the title I've never heard of. And I was like, I don't think I've, know anything about this song. And I can't remember what record it was. It might've been like Volume 4 or Sabotage or something. And I went on, I was like, I'm going to check this song out. And I listened to it. And I'm like, it sounds like kind of like the prototype, kind of like the origin story of Ghost. Like it was like, this kind of sounds like it could be a Ghost song. So I totally got like why like that song meant so much to him, because it probably like had a lot to do with kind of shaping of what, he wanted, eventually his music to be like. Because it did really had like that kind of, what Ghost kind of like encaptures. And I was like, oh, this is a really cool song.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I kind of want to hear him sing this song now, because it sounds like he would just totally crush that song. So hopefully, maybe there's a lot of bands that were doing what they played at Back to the Beginning. They were, Lamb of God put out like a cover recording of it. And I know like Judas Priest just put out War Pigs and stuff like that. So maybe Tobias will do a cover of that song in tribute, and get to do the song that he wanted to originally perform. But it was really cool to hear kind of, you can hear like the versatility in Sabbath and like how wide of their influence is on just, hard rock to metal to extreme metal and everything in between. So it's pretty amazing.
I talked to Chad Gray from Mudvayne recently, and he was like, I sat down, because he's another Ozzfest band, and counted, and I forget what the actual number was, but it was like 326 bands that launched off of the Ozzfest. And he's like, even before that, Ozzy was such a great eye for talent that he was huge, but would invite lesser known bands like Metallica in the early days to open up for him. So the idea of this influence doesn't just stop with the music he made, but what an eye for talent he was, like you said, with the guitar players and the musicians he worked with, but also the bands he chose to elevate by touring with them and putting them on his concerts and on his festivals, which even for you guys, like what you said, like getting on the Ozzfest was a big launch pad for a lot of bands.
Yeah, and like back we did it in like 2005. Like Ozzfest was still like, I think it started like 99 or something.
Oh, I was there. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like it was still a big, like still a new thing at the time. And just every year you'd always hear about like, Slipknot or, this band like breaking or like making like a big impact on the tour and just kind of really exploding after being on that tour. So like, it was like everyone was like, and it wasn't like you could just be like, hey, we want to, you had to like essentially pay to be on it, but it's like you had to get like the seal of approval first before you could even. So it wasn't like a label could just like throw endless money at Ozzfest to get like buy your band on. It was like you had to get, basically vetted and like be like, all right, we approve of this band, so we'll have you on.
You needed to be worthy.
Yeah, it was, I'm sure like the people at Ozzfest back then, the amount of submissions they probably had to go through was probably insane, of every band or every label submitting like anything that they had that had a record out or a new record coming out. Cause it was a big deal. If you had a record out or just came out, Ascendancy came out like maybe like 3 months before we did Ozzfest. So that was a big launching pad for our record. And I remember we were on tour and we were like in Toronto on tour, and our manager called us, was like, hey, got some news. He's like, we just got confirmed for Ozzfest. And we were just walking down the street when we got the call. And I remember we were all just high-fiving and just like, holy shit, I can't believe we got on Ozzfest. And it was, we knew how big of a deal it was to be included on that. And, the year we still have like some of the running order sheets that we had going on at like 9:20 in the morning. And still being a ton of people at the show at 9:20 in the morning. It's like, it's crazy to think that like people were showing up to a metal show at a parking lot essentially at 9:20 in the morning to see the first band go on and then be there all day and night to watch. And I remember we played in Pittsburgh. We were the first band on at 9:20 in the morning, and just like seeing this like open field with a hill, and then like 9 o'clock in the morning, you just see when they let the doors open, just seeing a horde of people just flooding in and playing at 9:20 in the morning.
Over the berm, like just a herd of wild buffalo.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like when you had to get ready for that time slot, it was like we were unloading the trailer. It was still dark out, we're getting ready to play, and you're just like, man, I can't believe I have to go on stage and play it. I'm like, this early in the morning when you're like still like, getting the crust out of your eyes, and you're like, oh, I gotta go rock now. But there were still thousands of people there going crazy, and it was incredible. Like what that festival meant to the fans and the bands, that people were like I gotta be there for the first band
until the last
questions
band.
Asked.
Yeah.
So it was great. There was a lot of fun times on that tour, a lot of great shows, and I just remember like they did like the FYE signings every day. And I just remember we just have like these giant lines and selling tons of records from people seeing us at that show. And, all the bands, we were playing for like 20 minutes. So we were playing only a couple songs. So it was basically like you were just out there doing like your kind of like your showcase of just like, hey, you got a limited amount of time, but you got to make an impact in a short amount of time. And it was just like you just went up there, and it was just like you just gave it your all for that 20 minutes, and it made an impact. And there was, that lineup that we had that year, like the second stage was just loaded with just insane bands. So it was a fun summer.
I always ask songwriters that come on the show about the perfect song. And I ask the question from a craft perspective. So what song from any artist, any era, do you look at and go, okay, that song is perfectly crafted and you covet it? You wish you wrote it. Is there one you can think of?
Oh man, there's so many. I've definitely like appreciated like especially like, after writing so many records and stuff like that. Like I definitely listen to a lot of my favorite bands and kind of like analyze like the song structures or how they're using different parts. And there's definitely like a very, the craft of doing more with less is definitely an interesting deep dive of just like how you could use or the same parts in different ways in the song, where you, as a listener, you're not even really like realizing that it's like, oh, that's like the song's only literally like two parts, but you don't really think of it as like this repetitive, redundant thing. So I've definitely been kind of like looking into that kind of stuff. But I think when I've asked this question before, basically, or like the question of like what song, like I wish if I could have wrote it myself, and at least like back years ago, I'd always say like, you know, it was a big song for me growing up as a kid, but Iron Maiden's "Hallowed Be Thy Name" was a song that I always loved. Just so the journey of the song was always super cool. But I was like, if a song I wish I wrote that, like, you know, on the I guess the financial side would be like, I'd be like, oh yeah, fucking Enter Sandman or some shit. That'd be that song would, you know,
those royalties wouldn't suck.
Oh yeah. That's nothing else matters. Like one of those songs where you're just like, oh yeah, you could like live off that one song, you know. But it's also like really, you know, well written song in itself. But it's obviously massively popular. But that was always kind of like my joke was like, oh yeah, everyone wishes they wrote Enter Sandman. You know,
I think Elton John said that he believes Nothing Else Matters is one of the greatest songs ever written, which to a guy like James Hetfield, who values Elton John's songwriting ability so much, like the ultimate compliment, right?
Oh yeah. That's you know, just great that, you know, that record is just full of, you know, amazing written tunes, and on the extreme side, you know, like one of my favorite metal songs of all time is Slayer's "Angel of Death." So that wouldn't suck to have on your resume as far as like just like the badass factor of how sick that song is. So there's so many amazing songs. You know, I could go down through every one of my favorite band and like just name drop a million songs that I think are amazing written songs. So there's you know, so many amazing songwriters in the genre that it's you know, it's hard to just pick one when like I could pick 100 from like one band.
I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask about the recent lineup changes with the band and moving forward. Are you looking at it like a new era of Trivium? How does it look from the inside when you have a lineup change and you release new music and go out on the road? Because obviously the fans love the band, and so therefore they love the members that are no longer in the band as well. Yeah, it's always a tough thing. It's not something, you know, any band enjoys having to do, because it's whenever you have, you know, someone's replaced or leaves or something, there's obviously a lot of extra work that you have to do to get someone new up to speed and kind of in the fold. So it was definitely nothing we were expecting that was going to happen. You know, we were, you know, with Alex, he's been in the band for almost 10 years. So we were kind of like, thought this was how it was going to be for, you know, the band. And we had the new EP coming out, this tour coming up, and it was kind of a unexpected shock for the band. And but it's like, you know, whenever something like this happens, you know, you're not expecting it, but it's like there's work to be done. We have stuff coming up that it's like, and in a way, you kind of sometimes have to be like, all right, we got to put blinders on and just kind of block out the, you know, the emotion and other stuff, and just like, we have this and this we have to do, or we're screwed. So at least for the time being, it's like just kind of buckle down and kind of figure it out. And so that's what we had to do for, you know, the last like 2 weeks, was just like, hey, we have this Aftershock Festival coming up, and we have this tour coming up. So it's like we at least have to figure that part out first. And then we can kind of like, you know, sit back and kind of take a breath and kind of see what, you know, what I guess what we have to do for the long term next. But yeah, it was, you know, we ended on, you know, great terms, just kind of stuff, you know, don't want to, you know, put words into anyone's mouth of like why or the reason or anything like that. But, you know, stuff happens, you know, in life that changes, you know, maybe the direction of what you want to do or what you're happy doing. And, you know, just kind of happened where we weren't expecting it. You know, we thought you know, Alex was going to be the guy for, you know, for the rest of basically our career. You know, we had a great run of records, and the EPs kind of like the icing on the cake of I guess the era now.
So it's like we kind of, everything we did together, I thought we had a great run of creativity and everything like that. So we were definitely bummed, but it's definitely, whenever something happens, a change sometimes, kind of sucks when you first do it. And then it's like, once you kind of have to look at it as like, all right, well, it's like kind of forced into something. Like, how do we make the best out of it with what we can do? And, we found a great person to help us in the short term with Grayson from Sepultura. Luckily they were off tour for a little bit that we could borrow him for a couple weeks. And
well,
then,
it'll be easy for him to play the Sepultura cover you guys did. So at least that'll be easy for him.
Yeah, that's why we threw it in the set, because it was just one less thing we had to worry about, getting someone up to speed on. And then, we definitely kind of never really had the time away or off to just kind of like, I guess, let people know that we are, I guess, there's an opening in the drum location. So just kind of like, hey, just let people come to us if they're interested or audition, maybe, we never had a chance to just like, hey, maybe we just like fly a couple people out and just bring them into the hangar and just jam and just kind of see what happens and see how it vibes and whatever. So we've always been like on a tour or right before a tour where it's like, we have to do something immediately now to get our, so we don't have to cancel anything. So we're in a little bit better, spot where we can kind of take our time, and, we've had some discussions with people. So it's just be interesting to kind of see how, just kind of vibe it out with people. And luckily there's some people, from being around and touring a lot that, there's, people that we've talked to are like, they're not like complete strangers, or we don't know who they are. So it's a little bit easier to kind of get through the process when you're kind of a little bit somewhat familiar with people, to at least on a playing or personality wise, you've kind of heard them or seen them in some aspect, that it makes it a little bit easier to kind of, I guess, vet, the potential candidates and stuff like that. But, we obviously, we got the touring covered, but then next year, starting in January, we're kind of full on into the next album mode. So, we need, we're going to need a drummer to perform on the record.
It's been a crazy
and also,
year for drummers. So many bands have changed drummers. I mean, even Rush just announced that they're going back out on the road and had to bring in a drummer. Now's a really good time. If you're a really good drummer without a gig, there are some really good gigs open.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess there's something about drummers. Who knows?
Well,
but
if the guys from Spinal Tap would stop killing them off, there'd be more of them around.
Yeah, it's just I guess the musician life can be crazy at times. There's a lot of bands that have, not just drummers. There's a lot of bands that are always, got different people coming in and out. But definitely our band, with it's not just like a singer with a hired gun backing band or anything like that. So it's always tough, like when you lose a member or someone leaves or whatever, because the fans do get attached to the people that play on the records, or you meet them on tour and they, there's a face to the band with the members and everything like that. So we knew, like, when it all went down, we were like, yeah, it's going to suck, because I know there's a lot of fans that are going to be sad to see him go. Because he was a very liked person in the band and was around for a long time. So fans definitely were used to him being around. And so definitely sucks. But, we're happy he's happy, and happy, whatever he's, his next thing he's interested in doing. We're definitely happy that he'll be doing exactly what he wants to do and on his terms and everything like that. So yeah, it's going to be a fun little journey to kind of see what the next thing brings.
Well, there's a lot going on with Trivium. You guys just released the video for Bury Me With Screams. Obviously, the EP comes out on Halloween, and the Ascend Above the Ashes tour is going to be in Wallingford, Connecticut at the Toyota Oakdale Theater November 7th. And then your hometown show in Portland, Maine at the Cross Insurance Arena on November 8th. And if any of your friends and family are listening, the guest list is getting full.
Yeah, I'm sure it's gonna get pretty full pretty quick. but it's gonna be fun. Yeah, I don't think we ever played in Wallingford, so that'll be. We don't really hit Connecticut too often over the years, so it's definitely fun to have some more New England area shows on this run. Since last tour, we only played at Boston, I believe. So always good to get back up there, especially during. Now we got the sports season kicking off with hockey and basketball. Get the
Yeah, they
always
just
nice,
announced.
Always nice to be back up in the Northeast during the sports season.
They just announced Zdeno Chara is getting his number retired at the Garden, which is very cool.
Oh, hell yeah. That's awesome. I have his jersey in my closet.
There will be 2 number 33s in the rafters now, which is awesome.
Sick, yeah. I remember I bought his jersey when I went to a Bruins game years ago, so I still have it hanging up.
Well, if anybody's listening from outside of New England, the whole tour is up for sale right now. I've got all of the Trivium links, all the details on all the tour dates in the show notes of this episode.
Hell yeah. Looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun one.
It was so good to see you. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
You got it. I'll talk to you later.
All right, later.
There he is, Corey Beaulieu from Trivium. The band's new EP, Struck Dead, is available everywhere. You can find Corey online, find Trivium online, and find me with all of the links that are in the show notes of this episode. You'll also find the link to this episode's corresponding playlist. I make a playlist for every full-length episode of the Mistress Carrie podcast that features all of my guest music and all the artists and songs that we referenced in the interview. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to like, follow, comment, share, and subscribe to the Mistress Carrie podcast. New full-length episodes come out every Wednesday. Plus, every weekday, you get the sit rep. The Situation Report gives you all your rock news, music headlines, and entertainment updates in about 5 minutes. And you never know when we're going to release a bonus episode. You can join me live every Tuesday night at 8:30 Eastern for my weekly streaming video show, Cocktails in the War Room, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. And you can always find me on the radio. Get the details on all of that and more at MistressCarrie.com. And while you're there, get a jump on your holiday shopping in the online Mistress Carrie store. There's new stickers, beanies, and the brand new Mistress Carrie Jack Rack. The Mistress Carrie podcast, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network.